Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. Want to go ahead and follow up on a story and a conversation that we had on Wednesday night's Aaron Torres pod involving a player named Ansley Almanor. Okay, so if you listen to the show, we covered a lot of ground. We actually talked a little college football week one. We talked a little bit about DJ Wagner, what's going on there. We talked about portal winners and losers. But one thing that we did talk about was the player that I just mentioned, Ansley Almanor, a 6'7" forward who played the last couple of years at Fairleigh Dickinson. Was part of their team that upset Purdue in the NCAA tournament a few years ago. He comes back to school this year and has a really good year where he averages 16 points per game on 39% three-point shooting. Well, I bring it up because over the last couple of days, he has been on a visit to the University of Kentucky. And if you listen to the show on Wednesday, I said, look, nothing's official yet, but I expect in the next 24 or so hours to see one of those Cody Feger boom gifts, which indicates basically that this kid is about to commit, and he will commit, and he will end up a Kentucky Wildcat. Well, I bring it up because about 9:30 Eastern time, we get that Cody Feger gif, and just moments after, on Thursday morning, we did the show Wednesday night, but by Thursday morning, mid-morning, we had ourselves another Kentucky Wildcat as Ansley Almanor, as I said a few times, 6'7" forward, played at Fairleigh Dickinson last year. He commits to the University of Kentucky, the 11th player that Mark Pope has gotten a commitment from this offseason. And let me just say this. You know what we got right now? Oh, baby, we got some hope in Mark Pope. That is right, hope in Mark Pope. Shout out to Mark Pope. By the way, shout out to everyone who's ordered this t-shirt, Hope in Mark Pope. We have sold a ton. We've sent out a ton. We're going to send out another shipment this weekend, because these are flying off the shelves. By the way, if you did enjoy that shirt, you can get it at AaronTorresOnline.com/merchandise. AaronTorresOnline.com/merchandise. You know why? Because we got hope in Mark Pope. Okay, let's get to it. Let's discuss this commitment. Listen, I love everything about this, and I love what it says about Mark Pope, how he's putting together this roster. And in a minute, I do want to talk about what's next for this program, the final piece or so of the 2024-2025 roster, who that could be. But let's start with Almanor. We talked a lot about him on Wednesday's show. Really nice piece. I really like him a lot. 6'7" forward, averaged 16 points per game, as I said, at Fairleigh Dickinson. But what really stands out, it's the number that I gave you a minute ago. 39% shooting from behind the three-point arc. And I think what's important to note, and we talked about this with Cody Brea a few weeks ago when Cody Brea committed. It's not just that he shoots 39% from three. It's that he shot 39% from three, taking a high volume of three-point shots. It's one thing if you shoot 39% on, 14 attempts all year. This kid, this past season, took 236 three-point attempts, 93 three-pointers made. So I don't care what level you are. When you're 6'7" and you can make 39% of your three-point attempts on over 200 attempts on the season, you can shoot the crap out of the ball. And so I love the piece, and I love what it represents in two different ways. One, I love what it represents as you look at the totality of the Mark Pope era and the first roster that he has put together. Now, I know a lot of people will say, where's the star power? Where are the 5 stars? Where's the one and done? Listen, if you go through this roster, I think this roster is going to be really good. I've said it. I have no disrespect intended towards other media members. I don't understand how you can't look at this roster and see a top 25 team. I see a top 15 team, if we're being honest. You have the best two-way guard in the portal, Lamont Butler, just committed. You have the best defensive big in the portal, Amari Williams, that committed earlier this offseason. You have a backup center in Brandon Garrison, who's a former McDonald's All-American. But you know what else you have? Pretty much everybody else on the floor can shoot the three-point ball. Otega Owe, forward, wing player. Forward's probably not the right word. Wing player from Oklahoma, 37% shooting from three. Andrew Carr, 6'10", forward, played at Wake Forest, 37% shooting from three. Kirk Risa, probably going to end up being your backup point guard, 42% shooting from three. Kobe Brea, who we just mentioned, the best three-point shooter in the portal, 49% on over 200 attempts from behind the three-point arc. Travis Perry, Trent Noah, Colin Chandler can all shoot the ball. And of course, our newest Kentucky Wildcat, the newest Kentucky Wildcat, Ansley Almanor, shooting 39%. So listen to what I just said. You have elite defensive play at the front end and the back end as far as the point guard and the center spot. Then you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You have 5 players who shot 37% or better from behind the three-point line last year at the major college level. Find it interesting as well. What do Ansley Almanor have in common? What does he have in common with Kobe Brea, Kirk Risa, Andrew Carr, Amari Williams, Lamont Butler? These are all 4th or 5th year college players. So you go from obviously in a year in, year out basis to having one of the least experienced teams in college basketball to frankly maybe having the most experienced team next year with, I believe, like 6 players that are entering their final year of eligibility, 5 of which are 5th year guys. So I love the roster. I love what it's about. And I love how Mark Pope is filling out the back part of his roster as well. Listen, I am not anti-Calipari, okay? I think Cal's going to do well at Arkansas. But I bring it up because it felt like every offseason it was scramble drill to get the final few roster spots filled. And then, oh, by the way, guess what? It was usually a freshman that realistically wasn't going to play. This past offseason, no disrespect, but we remember it was Joey Hart, it was Jordan Burks, it was this, it was that. It was like you knew those guys weren't going to play. They weren't going to be able to contribute. Well, now you have a guy in Ansley Almanor who's probably going to be your 9th, 10th guy who, frankly, is a guy who has contributed at the college level, has played in NCAA tournament games. I love that for this Kentucky team. Now, again, probably means some of the freshmen, maybe Trent Noah, it's going to take a little bit longer for him to get on the court. But if you're talking about your 9th or 10th guy, being a guy that shot 39% from three this past year, I love that for this team. I think he brings veteran depth, experience, and I think it's cool how Pope kind of found this guy. We talked about it on Wednesday's show. We talked about the fact that this was a kid that entered the portal, was mostly being recruited by mid-majors, Siena, Pepperdine, whatever. And even the interview, remember, we talked about the interview with the guy who runs Siena's collective. And he basically said, yeah, we felt like we were in good shape for this kid. Then Kentucky called, and we knew we were screwed. Now, I know what everyone's going to say. Oh, well, how they're recruiting against Siena now? This team stinks. No, they're recruiting against Siena for a guy that would have been Siena's probably their best player, as opposed to a 10th or 11th guy that's going to play 7, 8, 9 minutes off the bench. And as long as he understands that, that's all that really matters. That's all that really matters for Kentucky. I love the piece. I love the veteran experience. I love that Mark Pope, rather than just not using the scholarship or whatever, is finding veteran guys that understand, and this is what we talked about on Wednesday's show, is that I believe that you can always find guys at the tail end of the portal that are willing to come in and play at a major university and play in the SEC or the Big 12 or the Big East and fill spots at the end of the portal cycle. I mentioned it, UConn 2 years ago when they won the national championship, a key contributor was a guy named Joey Calcaterra. Dan Hurley called him Joey California. He was a kid who committed in June or July. And Dan Hurley was like, look, man, I can't promise you playing time. And he was like, I just want the opportunity to play at UConn and earn a spot. He earned playing time, and he was a valuable piece. And I kind of see Ansley Almanor in the same vein. So it's an exciting moment. And I think lastly, to kind of wrap, the big question is, what the heck is next for Kentucky? Because a month ago they had 0 scholarship player. Well, I guess they always had 1 or 2. They always had 1 with Trent Perry, 2 with Colin Chandler. But now you start to look forward and they're at 11, and you just wonder how many more they're actually going to add. Okay. So first off, I don't think the plan is to really go beyond 12. Mark Pope has said that probably won't fill all 13 scholarships with guys that can play. And so I think the interesting question is, who takes that last spot? I still think Jackson Robinson is atop the board. We all know the story. Former BYU player, former player at a lot of places. Started his career at A&M, went to Arkansas, played for Eric Musselman, goes to BYU. But he was a very good player at BYU this past season. Led the team in scoring, was a player who was a major contributor on an NCAA tournament team, averaged 14 points, 35% three-point shooting. I think the question with Jackson Robinson is, does he come back to play college basketball? We've talked about it a ton if you listen to the Aaron Torres pod. The bottom line is, listen, this is a knock on the kid, but he's played 4 years of college basketball, 3 different schools. He has his degree from BYU. And to me, he has treated this process as though he is going pro the entire time. I know he did an interview, I believe, with Ben Roberts of the Herald Leader, where he basically said, look, I give Coach Pope credit. He's had my back. I know that he wants me at Kentucky, but he's also giving me the space to do what is best for me. And so in my opinion, this is just my opinion now, and we should find out in the coming days, by the way. In my opinion, I think this guy just wants to be a pro. I know what the argument is. You'll probably, frankly, make more money at Kentucky next year in NIL than you will playing on a two-way contract or in the G League or whatever. But not everybody wants to come back to college. Not everybody wants to come back and take classes and whatever. Some people just want to start their careers and make it about basketball. Now, if he does come back, I think there's a heck of a pitch from Mark Pope. It's that, he's frankly probably going to be a starter, a high-level guy, a difference-making guy, and maybe the guy that puts them over the top if you're Kentucky. I already think they're a top 15 team, but others aren't as sold. I think you add Jackson Robinson to this group. Now you're talking about a for sure, in my opinion, now we're talking fringe top 10 team. I think everybody else would see a fringe top 20 team. I would see a fringe top 10 team, but I think that's the pitch. Come back, play on the biggest stage. If you ball out, people will notice. I was thinking about this. Antonio Reeves was incredible this year at Kentucky, but he was a guy a year ago that probably wanted to go pro, was undraftable or wasn't going to get drafted. Maybe that's the better way to put it. Comes back, shows he's a 3-level scorer, and guess what happens? People are now talking about him as a first-round pick. Jackson Robinson, right now, to me, I believe is a more advanced player than Antonio Reeves was a year ago and has 4 years of Power 5 experience. And so do I know he's coming back? I don't know. But do I think there's a heck of a sales pitch? And by the way, I know it's a previous regime. Antonio Reeves didn't play for Mark Pope, but do I believe that there's a kind of a natural correlation in how Antonio Reeves' stock rose and how it could for Jackson Robinson with this roster? Yeah, I believe there's something there. So we'll see what happens. For what it's worth, I don't believe that if he comes back, he's looking at other schools. I know there's been some Kansas buzz. I don't see it. Go to Kansas and be what? The 3rd or 4th leading scorer? Why? I mean, if it's about a bag, you're going to get a bag at Kentucky. You're going to have a much better role for a coach who knows you. I know there's a little Arkansas buzz. I don't see that one either. So my guess is if Jackson Robinson comes back, it will be at Kentucky. I'd be curious what happens now with Chaz Lanier and Wooga Poplar. Chaz Lanier, of course, is the guy who played at North Florida. He's from Nashville. It has seemed like since his recruitment really picked up that it's Tennessee and Kentucky. And I'll be curious. The Ansley Almanor piece of it makes me feel like Chaz Lanier probably off the board, or Chaz Lanier is only on the board if they know that Jackson Robinson is off the board. Don't know if Jackson Robinson wanted to commit today, if they'd still take Chaz Lanier. I do think if Chaz Lanier committed today, they would still take Jackson Robinson if he wanted to come. But I just bring it up because I think that one will be interesting to watch going forward. And then the other name, and by the way, with Chaz Lanier, I think everybody knows, but 21 points or 19 points per game, North Florida, really interesting story, was a role player for 3 years, completely blows up this year, turns into a really good player. It's down to Tennessee and Kentucky. I think it's only those two. I don't know that anyone really knows at this point. And I think he's another one. He's going through the draft process. He seems much less likely to stay in the draft than Jackson Robinson because he's going to get a nice payday in college. Something that I think probably coming from the mid-major level he would appreciate. The only other name that I really see on the Kentucky big board is Wooga Poplar. I think we can pretty much probably eliminate him at this point. Took a visit to Villanova. He's from Philly. I think he's going to take a visit to Oregon as well. I don't know how to say this delicately. Those are two, those feel like NIL plays to me. I know Villanova under Jay Wright, they didn't scream NIL, but the last year or so under Kyle Neptune, they really went heavy into the NIL space. Oregon, we know, they've been active in the NIL space. Let's just put it that way. I'll put it delicately. So to me, I think the priority now is obviously Jackson Robinson. The question is, would you take Lanier and Robinson if Lanier wants to the opportunity? That remains to be seen. We don't know, but ultimately, not sure it matters. And again, when something happens, if something happens, we'll come back and react to it. But I already believe Kentucky's a top 15 team. Nobody else in the media does. That's okay. I'm not here to criticize other people's opinions. That's just my own. But I think you get Jackson Robinson to round this out at 12. I don't know how you can't talk about Kentucky as a top 20 team. I think at that point, the argument is actually closer to a top 10 team. Just my opinion. If you enjoyed this video, do me a quick favor. Make sure to subscribe to the Aaron Torres Pod YouTube channel. New clips, videos going up every single day. By the way, I promised you, the day Cal left for Arkansas, I said, we're not stopping. Just because the season's about to end, we're going to go strong until the offseason gets settled, until Kentucky gets its coach and its roster figured out. We have done that. By the way, mentioned it earlier, but you want to support the show, get your Hope in Mark Pope shirt available at AaronTorresOnline.com. By the way, make sure to subscribe also, or follow also, the the Torres on UK page, all Kentucky, all the time. Appreciate your support.